So we got to talk about this Rosh Hashanah, which is New Year's. Now, the Jewish celebration of New Year's seems quite different from the secular celebration of New Year's. In the secular world, you get drunk and you watch large things fall out of the sky. It's an apple in New York. It's a peach in Georgia. I don't know what it is, but it's sort of a drunken affair. And then people, the most, I guess, the most spiritual component is you take on a New Year's resolution that maybe you keep until the 2nd of January, where afterwards that it's completely lost and it's gone. What is the Jewish New Year's and the world New Year's? The real New Year's is Rosh Hashanah, and it's called a Day of Judgment. Now, I want to define why it's called a Day of Judgment. I mean, really, it begs the question, what happened on Rosh Hashanah? Well, Adam and Eve, humanity, were created. The world itself was created 6 days before. I'm not going to the discussion of how 24 hours and time relative or millions of years, whatever it is, there's 6 units. Maybe one day we'll talk about time. Time is a very, very fascinating concept, what it is. But whatever that is, that's not a discussion right now. But on the 6th day, the 6th unit is when humanity is created, and that is Rosh Hashanah. So, why a Day of Judgment? I mean, why not a birthday party? It doesn't have to be a drunken, stupid thing, but have a happy birthday. Yay, humanity was created. Why a Day of Judgment? What does one have to do with what does the creation of humanity have to do with a day that we should be judged on? Why? And we need to understand this because really, as I said to you once before, there are 3 major times of judgment for every human being. One is after they die. After a person dies, all of their deeds are weighed and they are judged. And there are spiritual worlds and there are processes that a person goes through based on what they've done in their life. We've said the other one is a day of judgment called the Yom Adin HaGadol, Day of Great Judgment, when all of history as we know it changes, meaning that the world is moving towards a purpose. It's not arbitrary. It's not, and therefore it's not that the world ends, but the world history will change. They'll come to a point where the world moves to a time of clarity, and it moves out of the stage of this confused reality. We move into higher levels of consciousness, which are part of the process of the world to come. Which is ushered in by the times of the Messiah, which is not the world to come, but that is the ushering in of this new level. And at a certain point there, we arrive to the end of history. As we know, it's called the Day of Great Judgment, discussed in the book of Daniel and all the writings of the sages. And then everyone is judged also. And that's really the final judgment in history. And then there is the yearly judgment of Rosh Hashanah. Okay, so it's very, very heavy. And I don't understand. I understand when a person dies. That kind of makes sense because they lived their lives and how'd they do. I understand the time of end of history because then we're going to see how we all did in the whole sum total. And I explained to you once, because things that you put in motion do not necessarily come fulfilled until the end of time. If you do something, you help somebody right now, you will see the results of the reward for many, many generations, because things you put into motion might happen now. You have children, you train your children properly, you help someone else, and they become a righteous person because of your actions. So you start to gain, even after a person leaves this world, they gain spiritually, so their judgment is not done until all of history is complete. But why Rosh Hashanah? Why on the day of the happy birthday of humanity are we judged? Good, fair question. So let's explain. The purpose of creation, as we've said many, many, many times, is that God wants us to take our free will and to build ourselves and thereby develop our connection with Him, which is called the reward that we get. Now, of course, people might think, "Oh, I want a different reward. I want, candy. But that's ridiculous because there's a lot of different ways and pleasures in the world, but those things in the physical world are very, very low level. The greatest pleasure a person can ever experience is the experience of the infinite, of the transcendental, experiencing God, which we don't have words, but when you talk about goodness, a love, these are another names in its root for Hashem, for God. So everything that is good, everything is a source of existence. You experience by experiencing God. That's why, as I've seen many times, it's very funny how, some religions they go into great detail about the world to come. Famous story of a Arab a terrorist who went to blow someplace up in Israel, and it didn't work. And thank God it didn't go off, and he got wounded, but didn't break out. No one else got hurt. And he almost died, and they actually took him to the hospital. And this terrorist then was, he was handcuffed to the bed. He was unconscious. And then he woke up, and the Shin Bet, the Mossad, the CIA, whatever you want to call it in Israel, was all around the bed waiting for this guy to get up. And when he gets up, he says, "Okay, send in the virgins." And they go, "What?" Send in the virgins. He believed that in the idea of the world to come in the Muslim faith has to do with when they go, if they are righteous and they do these martyrdom acts of terrorism, they get a world of 70 virgins. So the CIA member, the Mossad person, says, "Listen, buddy, you ain't in heaven. You're closer to hell right now." So what happened was that But what was my point? The point is that the concept of the world to come in this person's mind is very physical. Because the more you try to describe the pleasure of eternity in physical terms, the less you understand it. You make it physical. Can't. And that's why the Torah doesn't go through great descriptions. There's many reasons why, but one of the reasons the Torah doesn't go through great descriptions of the world to come is because whatever you're going to say, you're going to make it less. Because you're going to then trap it into a physical thing. It's infinitely beyond, as the Mishnah says, 1 second of chorus ruach, of pleasure, of contentment in the world to come is greater than all the pleasures in this world, from the beginning of time to the end of time, of every single person put together. 1 split second of eternity, because it's a different realm. So God wants to give us this experience, but you cannot get the experience of this pleasure if you don't do something to make it yours. This is one of the most fundamental tenets of the creation of the world. So if I go, and I see this example a million times, if I go and I take someone, I say, "Nancy, can I use you as a volunteer for my story, Nancy?" Yeah. Okay. I always said it to them times. If I said to Nancy, "Okay, we go," and I said, "Nancy, you want $10 billion. She'd say yes. Now, there you go. Sorry, it's only a story. You're not getting it, so don't worry. Not for me, at least. But so we go and give Nancy $10 billion. Now, what happens? Now, of course, Nancy's everyone's best friend. Everyone loves Nancy. They have little Nancy dolls, Nancy posters. Yay! So that one day they want to honor her for just being Nancy. The big hall and thousands of people. They say, "Ladies and gentlemen, your favorite person in mine, Nancy." She comes up to the stage. You feel really great. But then me, the person that gave you all of this money, all of this greatness, walks in the back room and I start waving, hey, remember me? What happens to your feeling of feeling great? Feels blows up. It's finished. Why? Because at that moment you realize you didn't do it. It was given to you and you didn't make it. So the greatest pleasure is going to come when we earn this experience of connecting to God. Now, how do you do that? Well, very simple. You're in a world where there is good and bad pulling you every direction. When you choose good and you choose spiritual and you choose right and moral, you are acting godlike. And therefore, you can now experience God more because you are going in his ways. You are emulating him. In the spiritual world, the only way you can experience something is by being similar to it. Just like when people meet, I always say when you meet someone, the first thing you do is you play, geography, like, where you from? Where you from, Rod? Well, I'm from Houston, Texas. You're from Houston, Texas. Do you know my friend George? And you're like, no, I don't. Houston, Texas is a giant place. But you're trying to build commonality. And that commonality is because you want to feel connected. You have something in common. You want to experience Hashem. You have 120 years in this world to act God-like, because you're in a world that pulls you in both directions and you choose how you want to act. And therefore, the purpose of this world is to be in this maze, to choose to live morally, properly, righteously, emulating God. And then you start to, in this life, also start to get the appreciation for goodness, because it's like wine. The person doesn't know how to drink wine. When they first drink the wine, they're like, oh, it's terrible. But if you develop a taste for it, you appreciate good wine. You develop righteousness. You have a sense for goodness. You help someone. You feel good, right? You feel you connect to the things that people don't experience because you have a content life, because you are tuned into it. And that experience of developing a sensitivity towards godliness is a certain level in this life, but it's infinitely times more after this life, because then a person now has developed that, and that's called the reward of eternity. And people need to understand it, because people make a big mistake. They think we have the ideas of reward and punishment kind of messed up in our heads. We look at it very, very shallow. It's like, yes, you were a good boy. Here's a candy. And every good parent knows when they need to punish their child, you should always punish your child in a way that's connected to the act that the child did, right? Okay, whatever you did, you were I give you an example. One time with one of my kids was always late for carpool. And what was the best punishment was the time I said, okay, I know what's happening. This happens every day. Let's leave at 7 a.m. and at 7, 1 minute to 7, you start making the food and this and that, and then you come out 7:05, and your siblings are upset because they're going to be late to school. So you just know tomorrow at 7 o'clock exactly, I'm leaving. So the kid wants a test. So what happens? The kid came out at 7:01 or 7, even maybe less. But at 7 o'clock exactly, I was gone. and then my daughter calls me up, where are you? Like, well, I said I was leaving. The kid was never late again, because the punishment was clearly related to the act. There's the same thing with the punishment and the reward. Listen to this, guys, because this is amazing what I'm trying to explain here. The punishment is when a person distances themselves from God. The punishment is the distance from God, because that's all that's what goodness is. So now you're in a world of pain and disconnect. When a person connects to God, then afterwards, that's the pleasure. I'll give you an example. Let's say this is one of the. All right, I'm going to tell you something. This is a little bit out there, a little bit on the mystical realm, but it's important to know coming to Rosh Hashanah. But there's different kinds of things that happen to a person after they die. There's different spiritual possibilities they can go through. There's one negative consequence that could happen to a person, and it's called Kafka Keller. This is what it is. I'll give you an example. Imagine a person spends their whole life, and all they want to do is eat. They don't want to. All they do is, and people pay them. They become, I think, restaurant critics. It's like that's your life. Your life is just, eating food all day. So all they do is that's all they care about. They don't care about anything else. Eat. Now, what happens? They created the consciousness in their lives that everything is about my mouth pleasure of eating. When they die, they take that consciousness with them. Here comes the problem. They die, their consciousness wants to go get a hamburger, but they know they have no mouth. And that's not good. That means they've developed a life, they developed a consciousness that is so far away from righteousness that they're stuck in that feeling, but that's not reality. The things that are real are goodness, kindness, morality. Those are the connection. Those are the expressions of God in this world. And when you do those acts, you actually will be able to receive those things. And a person does the opposite, then they get stuck because when they leave this world, all of the illusions of this world, all of the so-called pleasures that are not really eternal, they're gone. So if a person hasn't built something and chosen properly, what are they taking with them after they leave this world? So the purpose of this world was to give us this good, this connection to God, this experience in this world to build ourselves, build the world, be able to experience godliness. God wanted to give it to us out of his loving kindness to us. So he created the world. He didn't need anything. So it therefore requires us to actually do those things ourselves to be able to receive it because we built it. That's going to be the greater experience. Right, Nancy? When you if I instead of giving you $10 billion, I gave you, $1,000, and you turned it to $10 billion, you gave me back the $1,000, said thank you for the loan. I made this. You'll have a very different feeling because you did it. It's yours. So that is why God wanted to create the world in the state of judgment, that a person needs to earn it. Again, I've said it many, many times, but in some of the religions, they make a grave mistake with this. They make a grave mistake because they say, it doesn't matter. God doesn't matter. It doesn't care. Yeah, God doesn't need my actions, but I need them. He wants me to develop myself that I did it, and not to stay as a pauper who's just taking and has nothing. Now, let's go back to my original question. So why is Rosh Hashanah the day of judgment? Just because humanity was created? It's a happy birthday. It's not why it's the day of judgment. I'll tell you why. Because if you start a business and you have a purpose, and I say, let's say, I don't know, I'm starting a business, and my goal is, I don't know, the first year we're going to make, I don't know, $50,000, whatever. So when I start it, when I have a goal and I start a starting point, when the cycle completes and I come back to the starting point, back to the beginning of it, I have to do an assessment. Every business does an assessment. Are we on the right path to what we are trying to accomplish? So since humanity is created on Rosh Hashanah, So God says, okay, we're going through a cycle. The year is like a circle, or more correctly, like a spiral that's moving towards a goal. When we come back to that moment in time, since the first creation of mankind was to earn and to act in a way that was going to have them earn their connection to God, when we come to the end of that cycle, we have to assess, well, how have we done during this cycle? What tools, and if I had a business, I would say, well, what do I want for the next year? Do you need a bigger budget, less of a budget? So when we come back to the day of our creation, God says, I gave you tools during the year. I gave you this, I gave you that, whatever it is, everyone's got their tools. Family, friends, money, well, whatever you got, challenges, everything is the tools you had for the year. How did you do? Now, based on that, the decision will be made, well, what tools, what resources, what budget do you need for the next year? Do you get more life? What do you get? That's why Rosh Hashanah is the Day of Judgment, because we're returning to the purpose of our birthday, why we're created. We're created to earn our connection. And now there requires an assessment. Well, have you? And watch how amazing this is. If the answer is yes, then a person gets blown in his life another year of life. We take it for granted, and we shouldn't. We take it for granted. What happens is that every year Rosh Hashanah is being judged. And therefore, the judgment is, did you use your tools? And how did you do? And what should you get for the coming year? But we all, we have to realize that every time God gives us life, that is a gift. He's giving it to us, God willing. And so therefore, Rosh Hashanah is that return to that same point, right? The Hebrew word Shana, the Hebrew word Shana, I don't know what year means in English. I mean, I know what the word means, but I don't know the root of it. The word Shana in Hebrew is l'shanot, to repeat, to cycle. Shana is the shanot, to repeat. Shnaim, 2. The word Shana is the numerical value 355, which is how many days there are in the lunar cycle. 354, 355, count the day itself. That's how many days there are in the lunar cycle. That's called a Shana. And then we have the 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, which brings me to 365, which lines up the solar and the lunar calendar, because that makes it that the 10 days in Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is a separate reality. The lunar cycle is a year, but the full year now, those 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, is a time you could change everything. Because if a person did not do well, that's a time to do tshuva. It's time to return, to fix it up. But before Shana also, we got to fix it up. So this is what's happening. Every creation, every person, every entity is judged on Rosh Hashanah. Everyone. Everyone comes in front of God, and he looks at every single individual and says, this is who you are. This is what I gave you. This is what you. How have you done? And therefore, it has a frightening component to it. It has a frightening component because it is a day of judgment, and therefore it behooves us to really try right now to fix ourselves as much as possible. Try to be as good as we can. Try to fix up. Think about like how you act towards other people. Do acts of kindness. It's like people, it's so funny. People like they think that I don't know. It's a weird thing. And a lot of times everyone feels that they're very nice, but I don't know, say, well, what kindness have you done today? And sometimes people are really stuck. What kindness have you done this week? It's not about like, oh, I don't hurt people. Yeah, of course. But like, that's not a kind person does kind acts. Abraham was always looking for kindness. All right. If you look at the Hebrew letters and the alphabet, I can't show you now because I don't have it on a chart. But there's the Aleph, and then there's the Bet, and then there's the Gimel Daled. I'll try to do it in my hands. Try to make a little. This is a Gimel. This is a Gimel. Okay. It's a Gimel. It's got like a little head here, and it has like a foot. And that's a Gimel. Now, the next letter, I feel like I'm doing a football cheer here. The next letter is a Dalet. A Dalet is like a line. It's like an XY axis. The word Gimel, which is the letter Gimel, is also the word Gomel. Gomel means to give. That's the Gimel. And then the next letter is called a Dalet. The Dalet is the word Dal, means a poor person. And so the two letters are in conjunction because the giver, the Gomel giver, wants to give to the poor person. But it says the poor person is embarrassed, so he turns away. It's why his head is facing this way. In Hebrew, we go from right to left. So the Gimel wants to give. He wants to give, but the poor person's embarrassed. That's why the laws of charity is you should give it in a way that's not known, not to embarrass the person who is receiving and not to feel haughty. And that's why one of the higher levels, in a certain sense, the highest level of charity is when you don't know you're giving to, and they don't know you don't know who you're giving to, and they don't know who's giving to them. So there's no embarrassment, there's no haughtiness. This is a high level of a loan because then he's really earning themselves. But the thing about the Gimel, I showed you my little picture. It says his leg is his leg. His leg is always running to the Dalet because it's not about waiting for it to happen. It's like the way of a giver is they look to give. Abraham was upset when he had his circumcision and there was nobody coming around that he could host. It bothered. He wasn't like, oh, good. Woo, nobody here. Okay, I got the day off. That's not what he said. He said, I want to give. So let's start as we're getting to the Rosh Hashanah to try to work on becoming more godlike, doing kindness, making sure we're speaking properly. All the good things that we want to fix ourselves up before the day of judgment, and prayer, obviously, because the quality of realizing you're standing in front of God and you're being judged is a very serious thing. And so therefore, it behooves us to prepare for Rosh Hashanah in its seriousness and to be very, optimistic at the same time, but really to realize it's a day of judgment and to make sure that we are lining up what our goals are. We're taking stock of how we've acted during the year, and we are committed to go and to really try to be righteous, to be judged as the righteous people of the world. And therefore, prayer also, talking to God, asking, begging really is all quite appropriate. And I think so that is it's my thought. I'll take some questions on it, but this is really that's what's happening right now. We're coming back to the starting point of creation, and it's back to the point of the purpose of life. So you got to ask yourself, okay, what have I done? How have I acted this year? How could I do better? What could I tilt the scales, that the scales of judgment should go in my favor? And that's the power of this day. And it's not just a birthday. It's a revisiting of the purpose of humanity. Purpose of humanity was that people should be the pinnacle of creation, elevate themselves in the entire world, and thereby connect to God and get that good reward of the experience that they're creating. And therefore now we got to ask, are we doing it? And prepare ourselves for the day of judgment, and the day of judgment to come before God, and everyone is going to be judged, and ask and beg for positive judgment, because you're bringing out what you really are about, what you really want to do. All right, those are my thoughts. I'm opening up to questions, ideas, comments.